Okay. It's all this technical. I'm skulking out of the back.
I was adjusting. Got a lot darker since I was here last.
Yeah, I didn't know something like that. Like a mask.
Oh, thank you. Hi. That was fun. Do it again.
Okay, Troy, looks good.
All right.
You know, sometimes it's surprising. Well, when I leave my eyes on the prompt, where are my keys? My mind explodes with confidence. At first, it felt like a good day. I will tell you so many stories.
Lizzie, how do you turn your volume up?
Then the lost keys, memories, and tidbits started piling up in my
It's a
brain.
Mac?
Yeah.
Okay, I can show you that. There's a couple keys and there's one that has a speaker.
Hers has that bar at the top. How do you turn your volume up? Yes.
I'm not hearing her. I'm not hearing her.
No.
That's up your side.
Which reminds me, I had
There we
actually
go.
called AAA like 2 times in the past 3 months maybe. For lockout assistance, one of those times involved standing in the Costco parking lot at Johnson for like an hour. There were probably literally thousands of times that my dad asked for help finding his keys throughout my childhood. To this day, I consider myself an expert at finding things, especially glasses. But to be clear, this only applies to other people's things. And also, it's worth pointing out that my dad is the oldest member of my family.
Hey, Troy.
This one's not playing.
Oh, and then I realized after.
Okay, it's good.
It's good?
Yeah, it'll be fine as long as we have that one on the way up. Yeah, I am not able to connect the two of them at once.
So
I'm not.
my mom told me.
All right, Chris, you can stop Cam.
Do you want to put this up on a music stand or something so it's
No.
higher?
Do not end broadcast. Just stop sound and stop Cam.
Like
The other word fat.
We got the edge of the freeway.
That was it. For years. I don't think I really realized it until the show was like, John literally built a private dick or stuff, or like, whatever, but I'm like, yeah.
It's like it's a means to an end for this job because like I had her right in front of her. She had sort of left the business, so these work programs. She wanted. So I'm like, you should stay on the show as long as like just like establish yourself.
I just so love.
Hi, thank you for coming. And are we live streaming,
I think so.
Christopher?
We are live, Lizzie.
We are live on estlosangeles.org. If anybody wants to text your friends and family and tell them where to find the live performance, we're right on our landing page of our website. And that's where you can donate in support of True Story, which has been going on since May of 2015.
Yeah.
Woo!
7 years. 7 years. And I want to take a moment to thank a couple of people, including Hutch, who's been, and Gordon. I think you've been doing it since the beginning, both of you, since the first performance. So I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful because the quality of the work's been amazing and it's been inspiring for me and it's inspired me to keep it going and growing. And I'm so very thankful to Christopher, to Troy. I want to do this now so I don't forget later when we're so drunk. And Tracy A. Lay for supporting and believing and having faith in this program. And I hope it grows and grows for all of us. So thank you all. And please support us. Just donate whatever you want. But,
what's the website again?
estlosangeles.org.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
audience member.
Thank you. Thank you, Daddy. And thank everybody watching from the comfort of your home, and thank you all for coming out tonight on a chilly Sunday in Los Angeles. How crazy is that?
3 days.
What's that?
3 days straight.
3 days straight. All right, my friends. Tonight's theme for True Story is, where are my keys? Everybody's got, a lost key story. And I started True Story with the idea that when people use the phrase true story, you're both about to speak your truth and embellish upon it. And that's where the art of the truth comes out. So, where are my keys? And I'm confessing this, and I'm proud of this. I am that person that everyone gives their spare key to. Yeah. I have keys to homes of friends, loved ones, neighbors, and I'm not sure whose key is whose at this point, except Michael and Hutch's, because it is Disney's Evil Queen, and it's a very large, dramatic key. It's very easy to find. I am flattered that people trust me with it. I feel good about being that person. And I do recognize that folks may be just giving me their keys because I don't seem to go anywhere and I'm always at home most of the time. But still, I'm consistent. I'm that consistent person and people seem to appreciate that. And I'm thankful for it. I feel trusted. It's that same good feeling that I have hosting True Story for 7 years now. Good people trust me with their truth. And tonight is no different. We have 4 wonderful writers and 4 awesome stories. And they are not only told well, but told from the heart. And I couldn't feel prouder to hold this safe space for them to share their truths with you. So we are going to begin tonight with someone who has not been on our stage yet, so I want everybody to give a very warm welcome to my dear, dear friend. I also have her piece. Sharon Lennon. Hi, everyone. So does everyone here remember Latchkey Kids, that whole thing,
Yes.
right? So that was like, for anyone who doesn't know, it was a 1980s phenomenon. Children all over the country were letting themselves into their homes after school with their own set of keys. Oh, the horror, shameful. I mean, this is really how it was portrayed in the media back then. But to me, being a latchkey kid felt like a fucking dream. When I got home from school, one of two scenarios would occur. If the side door was unlocked, my sister and I would let ourselves in. I'd head straight to the kitchen cabinet for a snack. Now, you had to be really careful when you did this, because when you opened it, the hinges would squeak if you were too fast on the draw. And then it would happen. Who's in the kitchen? That's my mom, Helen. No one. Just getting a snack. Don't touch the Triscuits or the wine cheese. Those are for company, because kids historically love wine cheese. And if anyone opens that can of black olives, I'll wring your neck. The other scenario, 8 times out of 10, would go like this. We'd get home, from outside we'd hear music blasting, I mean top volume. Leo Sayer, the Carpenters, Luther Vandross, Helen Reddy. My mom would be vacuuming, singing along to the music, top of her voice. And on those days, we were locked out. She'd let us in when she felt like it, not for a snack or for homework or to use the bathroom, because no one fucks with Helen's alone time. So eventually, I figured out how to break in through the basement window. So my mom had my dad put an alarm on the window, but I figured out how to trip the lock and get in anyway. Then he installed a much more sophisticated alarm. I figured out how to trip that one too. At some point, I graduated to breaking and entering from the windows on the second floor.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I never had a set of keys to the house I grew up in, except for that one period of time right after high school and before I moved out. I had a job, so my mom had to give me my own keys. Once I moved out, she snatched them right back.
Oh.
She needed absolute and total control over the house. So I just want to take a second here to say I love my mom profoundly. She was naturally creative. She loved animals. She loved talking about sex and body parts and periods. And she ended up being surprisingly cool with my being gay. It took a while, but still. And also, my mom's need to control her environment and everyone's actions in it was really intense. And it got way worse when she became a collector. Or as I like to say, an organized hoarder. So many silk flower arrangements. Easier to dust than the real ones. The antique kitchen tools for display only. The countless throw pillows not to be moved and definitely not for comfort. Over time, my dad would just fly into bursts of rage over this. What the fuck am I gonna do with all these stuffed animals? And Helen, there's so many goddamn knickknacks, I can't even put a book down. Oh, and the vintage photos of strangers in gilded frames. So many of them that she started hanging them below the chair. When my then girlfriend met my parents for the first time, she was so excited by all the family photos. And I said, they're not a family, they don't know those people. Of course, my girlfriend wanted to see photos of me. So I pointed to the refrigerator covered in decorative magnets, of course. There was one snapshot of me and my mom under a sad-eyed Basset Hound magnet. My mom started bragging about that day because I took her to see the penguins in Central Park Zoo. Oh, Sharon, we just laughed and laughed, didn't we? I said, yeah, and just fixed my eyes on the collection of penguin statues and cookie jars that sat on the kitchen counter. So all of this collecting shit started when I was in middle school. Money was getting really tight, so my mom got this job at Stearns Department Store in Paramus, New Jersey. Extra income for mortgage and bills, right? So one Saturday afternoon, we roll up to the mall to pick up my mom. We waited a long, long time, which was very usual with my mother. And then a 7-foot-tall stuffed animal, a gorilla, is walking toward the car with my mom's arms wrapped around its front. This thing was so massive and it must have cost a fortune. And my mom was laughing like, oh, that's terrific. She named him Herbie. He sat in the middle of our living room, surrounded by plastic potted plants for years. And I seriously don't even remember how we got that gorilla home. I just remember how angry my dad was. So after my parents sold our house in New Jersey and moved to Vermont, they moved 4 more times. Each time, they needed to purge more stuff because their homes kept getting smaller and smaller. My dad would toggle between arguing with her and enabling her. Every time they moved, what happened? My mom acquired more stuff. And her second to last place was what my mom called a double-wide mobile home, which is another way of saying we're not poor people and we don't live in a trailer park. And it was fancy. It had a master bedroom and a master bath. And that is where Herbie lived. In the jacuzzi, in the master bath. Surrounded by decorative soaps, candles that were never lit, and rubber ducks for looking at and not for bubble baths. He sat there, gigantic, with a fixed grin and 2 thumbs up, kind of like this. My mom thought the arrangement was like hilarious, but to me, it just felt like a big fuck you. To my girlfriend, it felt very disturbing. My mom, she infantilized herself in all kinds of ways. She would justify the buying, acquiring, and lying with this kind of coy look, I'm just a big kid. Or her favorite, well, I deserve it. So I learned how to be a parent to her ultimately, and that is the thing that ends up connecting us. And it's eventually the thing that made me resent her. At some point, I stepped away. I didn't see my family, any of them, for a very long time. Just checking phone calls that for me were almost always impossible and fraught. 7 years ago, 10 days before Christmas, my mom died. It was sudden and it was shocking. I flew out of LA and I landed in Burlington, Vermont at 5 a.m. The sky was still dark. It was freezing fucking cold, snow and ice everywhere. I got in my rental car and I drove to the place where she died to pick up my dad. He was devastated, just gut-wrenching grief. After that, it was just me and him for 7 days, and he did not stop talking the entire time. We stayed together in this small, subsidized apartment they ended up in. I had never seen it before. Only a tiny fraction of my mom's collections were there. My dad didn't want to leave. He didn't want me to leave the apartment, literally for anything. But I bought a pass to a gym 40 minutes away so I could work out in the mornings because I thought I will lose my shit if I don't have some outlet. First morning, I went to the gym with my combination lock. The one that I'd been using pretty much every day for 17 years. When I got to the gym, I went to a locker and I started to put the combo in. And I couldn't remember it. I tried again and I tried again, and just like that, just poof, it was gone, right along with my mom.
And you know, to this day, it's crazy because I still cannot remember that rock combo. So initially, I didn't want anything from that last apartment. None of it. I was just like, no, thank you. None of my mom's shit. No more decorative fucking objects. No more stuff. But on that last day, I just decided, you know what? I'll take a few things back. Among them was this hand-painted wood box. It's probably from the 1940s. I still have it. And not for display. I use it. At first, using it felt like a defiant act. Now it just feels like I'm righting a wrong. You know what I use it for? Keys. To my friends' homes and spare sets to my own. For my pet sitters and for anyone in my life who needs a place to stay or just to kick back. I tell them, make yourself comfortable. Whatever's in the fridge or the cabinets, help yourself. Anything that makes you feel at home. And by that, I also mean the black olives and the white cheese.
Thank you, Sharon, and welcome. Welcome to the True Story Tribe. Thanks. I just named it.
I know, thank you. I always wondered what we were.
Gordon. Gordon Henderson, everybody.
It is my understanding that we have two lives, one we learn with and one we live with. In my first life, I had mostly just one friend, Toad Gray. Toad lived like a retired circus man. He was a hedonist who ran at the mouth and was unfettered by social norms. He did not do shame or embarrassment. His parents were kind and gentle people, educators who accepted their son's insatiable appetite for pandemonium. It was a loving household. In comparison, my own home was a tomb. So gradually, at the age of 12, I stopped going home and stayed at Toad's house. Perhaps under the influence of Toad's older brother, John, Toad and I were beatniks in training. Never mind that the beat wave had crested at least a dozen years earlier, around the time we were born. Whatever. As far as we could tell, there was fun to be had, and we were going to have all of it. By whatever means, we would transcend our surroundings. We lived in the Cleveland area, Hudson. Hudson is a quaint, constricting sphincter. A Peyton Place kind of place, where the judgy chatter behind your back was deafening. At that time, if you were a misfit, underage, and stuck in such a place, there was only one way out: record stores. In our orbit, we knew them all and spent our allowance and lunch money on the sounds that set us free. When we weren't looking for records, we made trouble. We had our own language. It was a loud language, and we used it to, as one of our middle school teachers, Mr. Foster, put it, to make a mockery out of life. When we were 14 and entering high school, Toad saw a way out and went off to a Quaker boarding school. For me, the circus had left town. I was miserable. Toad seemed to be having a great time. So I convinced my parents to send me to the boarding school too. I even had to work hard in school. I got a job and went canvassing from door to door with my mom so she could keep her job and there would be enough money to pay for boarding school. What happened next has been well documented, mostly by me. The experience was stupefying. I developed a negative attitude and some bad habits. I also rewrote the Bible on a whim and declared myself an artist. When the school year ended, I was asked not to return. I will not describe what followed. Let's say I was on a downward trajectory for 6 or 8 months. Then my mother arranged with John, Toad's older brother, for John to become my legal guardian. I moved in with him in his apartment and went to a school that was somewhere between a prep school and a halfway house. If we take a moment here to look at what has just happened, it is that a friend has saved me from myself. This is the second instance of that in this story, and it will not be the last. John's apartment was only a block away from not one, but two record stores called respectively Record Exchange and Record Revolution. I got to know some of the people who worked behind the counter at both stores. One was John Mills, a thoughtful, soft-spoken young man who wore wire-rimmed glasses like John Lennon. He thought I resembled the singer Nick Drake, who I'd never heard of. Every time I went in, he brought up Nick Drake, his music, and how he died, which was by his own hand. John eventually brought in a record from his private collection for me to borrow. This was an unusual gesture, for it was clearly something that he cherished and would not have been easy to replace. The guy on the cover did, in fact, look like me. And he had big shoes, which were featured prominently on the cover. I liked all that, but I don't think I understood the music particularly. It was quiet by my standards, and it had strings on it. But I recognized that John Mills had reached out with the gift of music. Around this time, I was beginning to understand that sobriety is a positive step. But my troubles weren't over. John, Toad's brother, moved away to go to grad school. I had no option but to move into a room in the servants' quarters of a mansion near my school. There was no phone, and the bathroom and the refrigerator were down the hall, shared with other people, adults who had adult problems. I was still in high school, living alone, doing everything alone, trying to make sense of things. I went out sometimes at night, and like any other lonely person out without a car, I took a bus. One miserable night, I took the bus to where the record stores were. I went first to Record Exchange, traded in my records, and got something new. But then, as I was leaving, I found something possibly profound. The 13th floor elevators. It was not expensive, $350. The problem was, I had already spent all my trade-in money. Dejected, I walked out and went up to the street to Record Revolution. Record Revolution had a basement where low-budget and unusual records could be found. John Mills was there, working the counter. I told him my sob story. He stood up and said, "For the 13th floor elevators, I'll give you the money myself." He dug out 4 crumpled bills from his pocket and handed them to me. So that night, I did something I did not often do. I went home happy. I was happy again some months later when Toad Ray was finally expelled from the boarding school. His raw deal was my good fortune because it meant that he would be going to my school and we could get an apartment together. The crocus blossoms were bursting from the ground, and though Toad Ray and I were nihilists, we could not help but celebrate the coming of spring. In an ironic twist of fate, Toad and I had earned so many credits at the boarding school that we had basically completed the requirements needed to graduate from high school. Also, when together, our behavior was such that the teachers and administrators decided that we were a subversive and distracting influence on the other students. So we were given independent study assignments and only had to show up at school once or twice a week. We made the most of our situation. Our lonely nights were over. By then, we were no longer beatniks in training. We were living the dream, fully engaged in the pursuit of kicks that were both philosophical and physical. We attracted lots of friends and admirers. We went to Record Revolution almost daily and saw John Mills. But over time, he became distant and withdrawn. He started spending a lot of time out of town in what we feared was a cult. One afternoon, I was out on the small square of grass in front of our building, and Toad came up and said, "Brace yourself. John Mills killed himself." At that moment, I did not feel surprised. In fact, I hardly felt anything. Later, I was sitting on the couch talking to a friend on the phone. I was wearing a pair of brown sharkskin pants. Great pants. I think I still have them. But they had a thing about them. If you sat down and relaxed too much, the stuff fell out of your pockets. As I sat there on my phone, my keys made their way out of my pants and into the couch, which incidentally matched my pants. I sensed what was happening and stood up to try to fish them out. But the more I tried, the deeper into the dark innards of the couch they went. I had my whole arm inside the couch, and I could hear the keys jingling, yet I could not grasp anything. The more I couldn't find the keys, the more I began to unravel, until I was hysterical. My friend, still on the phone, said something along the lines of, "Goodness, what a fuss you're making," implying that I should get over it. I'll tell you what happened next. I found my keys. What I didn't do was get over John Mills, a young man of 26 checking out early. John gave me something, friendship and the gift of music. He may well have helped me escape a similar fate. I wished that I could have done the same for him. Later, I was at another record store called Wax Stacks, and I found a copy of the Nick Drake album that John Mills had loaned to me. The guy on the cover still looked like me, but this time I listened a little more carefully and could see that the music really was beautiful. Thank you.
This is Rosa Narasaki, who couldn't join us tonight, but we actually rescheduled from October, so she had written this piece and she's recorded to share with us tonight. We want to make sure the audio is working.
Okay,
No,
so
it's
need to
not.
connect.
Go.
Please hold.
Sorry, Rosie. Hold on. Please hold.
Please hold.
I can't see the Bluetooth. Sorry, hold on. Sorry, my fancy speaker went to sleep.
I think we're connected.
Such fun sounds.
Isn't that nice?
It was just connected.
Thank you.
We're being naughty tribe. Naughty tribe.
You know how sometimes you see a writing prompt and you immediately know the story you want to tell? Well, when I laid my eyes on the prompt, "Where are my keys?" my mind just exploded with possibilities. Which, at first, it felt like a good thing. Like, oh, I have so many stories to choose from. But then the lost keys, memories, and tidbits started piling up in my brain higher and higher until it frankly started feeling kind of overwhelming. There was a time I tried to break into my own car because I thought I locked my keys in it. It involved like sticking a ruler up through this gap in the floor. But then it turned out that my keys were just in the pocket of the pants I left the day before. Which was the time that I had to climb through my own trunk, even through the hole through the back seat. And after watching a YouTube tutorial, and I was so proud of myself for not having to call AAA. Oh, but which reminds me, I have actually called AAA like 2 times in the past 3 months, maybe, for lockout assistance. One of those times involved standing in the Costco parking lot at dusk for like an hour. There were probably literally thousands of times that my dad asked for help finding his keys throughout my childhood. To this day, I consider myself an expert at finding things, especially glasses. But to be clear, this only applies to other people's things, not my own. And also, it's worth pointing out that my dad is the only person on this planet who uses stuff that I do. And then I realized after all this is only the car section of lost keys. I've gone through several house keys. My mom told me to get the ones that are like really big now, so my key is like this big, but still sometimes misplace it. And when I had an office job, you know, one little swipe card you have to get into the building. Was always waiting awkwardly by the door for one of my coworkers to let me in because I left my key card on my desk or in my car. Sometimes I'd be sitting there for a really long time because I worked at a small startup that was dying and I only like 10 and I also had to replace that key card for that office job several times per year. I remember always being very ashamed going to the office manager telling him I needed a new one because he probably thought I was eating them or something. I am a loser of things, and I always have been. I was a real goody two-shoes as a kid. I didn't get in trouble for this thing, except for losing stuff. I remember I was just thinking about one of my great aunts who died when I was 5 or 6. I don't remember that much about her, but I remember visiting her in the hospital, and I think, yeah, I remember that. I enjoyed visiting the hospital. Anyway, she gave me this gold necklace. It was real gold. It was probably the first piece of real gold jewelry that I owned in my life. It had a beautiful, like, shimmering, twisted chain that like glittered in the light. It had the Japanese character for love hanging on it, and it was a miniature version of the necklace that she had. I loved this necklace. It made me feel close to my aunt, and it made me feel like a grown-up, which is a big deal when you're 5. My memories are a little hazy, but I'm pretty sure I was only allowed to wear a necklace on special occasions, and I'm also pretty sure that I was lectured extensively to be careful with it. And you know where it's going. The necklace disappeared not long after it was given, and I was told, probably not for the first time, that I needed to take better care of my belongings. Losing things was a sign of disrespect and carelessness. I felt horrible. The idea that I would ever get something so beautiful felt like an impossibility. I also felt sure that my dead great aunt somehow knew that I had lost it and was disappointed. This was probably the most formative lost item of my childhood, but it was just one of many. I lost many Roxy hoodies during my wannabe surfer girl phase. My iPod Nano fell out of my pocket during orchestra rehearsal once, and then one time, if you're the worst at a cross-country meet, I lost my cell phone. And I got a truly harrowing talking to from my dad, which sucked because, as I mentioned before, he is the only person on this planet that loses stuff more than I do. But luckily, the phone was down at the bottom of my shoe bag under my old worn socks. I mentioned recently to a therapist how often I lost stuff as a kid. I'd since been diagnosed with ADHD, and I reasoned that the many lost and forgotten items over the years were probably a symptom. She was like, "You probably need to feel as if you don't value your being." I was like, "Yes, it totally was." And she said, "But it's not your fault. It's just a symptom of ADHD." And that made me feel so good and vindicated. But then a few days after that session, I lost my credit card. I looked for one, and I couldn't pay for it, or I could, but I had to look it up through my bank. And I realized that while it's good to know the reason that I always lose stuff, I still need to work on finding solutions to keep track of everything. I thought of this. Ideally, I should probably just travel everywhere with a fanny pack and then wear a lanyard that never comes off my body even when I sleep or shower. My dad got married a couple of months ago, right after I saw this lost keys prompt. So as he was getting married, all these thoughts that I've just gone through were swirling around in my head. And then his new wife reads her vows, and they're like all peppered with like cute inside jokes. And you know what the last line was? "I promise to always help you find your keys." And it's good for him, I guess. Okay, thanks. Bye.
not least,
That is sick.
yeah, you do.
A sip of water.
Yeah, you ready?
I have a thing right here. It seems to be taking time.
Not just taking his time, but it's always well worth it. Punch Foster, everybody!
We were having our house painted, and on 3 separate occasions, the workmen accidentally knocked the earthquake valve attached to our gas line, which in turn turned off the gas, making our stove useless and our showers quite brisk. We then had to call a plumber who came out to the house and jiggled a thingamajig, the whole process taking about 14 seconds and costing about $58. The second time the plumber came out and jiggled the thingamajig, he thought he smelled gas and wanted access to our gas line in our basement. We have a gas line in our basement? He said he could get there through the crawl space at the side of the house. There is a crawl space that leads to a gas line in our basement? The crawl space, it turns out, was padlocked, and the plumber asked me for the key. There is a padlock on a crawl space that leads to a gas line in the basement? My mind swirled with disbelief. At some point, I must have known all this, but it's been so long since I have been keeper of the keys. That job has since been claimed by my 20-year-old son, Sebastian. Then it dawned on me. Sebastian, the keeper of the keys, sometimes the scatterer of the keys, sometimes the, I know I put them somewhere, of the keys, would know where the padlock key is. Maybe. Then it doubly dawned on me that Sebastian wasn't there. Early on, I realized my son, Sebastian, Bash, cute, was really quite superlative. He was a pocket baby, so dreamy and light. At 4 months, he weighed a wispy 8 pounds. And he was pretty, green eyes, dark lashes, dimples, cleft in his chin. Didn't matter what lumberjack onesie I dressed him in, everyone thought he was a girl. He was easy to schedule, took 2 healthy naps a day. He rarely had a problem eating or pooping, wasn't a big crier, smiled all the time. In fact, he was so social that going to a new babysitter or any stranger, he did with ease. When he was 6 or 7 months old, Michael and I planned to do that controversial thing that enables a baby to self-soothe. We were going to let him cry himself to sleep. We were so nervous the night of. We had heard such horror stories. Well, Sebastian fussed for a bit, saw we weren't coming in, rolled over and nodded off. I made my own baby food. I didn't curse. I did not have the TV on in the background, and I really thought those things offered a foundation for Sebastian's exemplary behavior. In that he was adopted through the county, I took every advantage. Any service offered, what you got? Occupational therapy, physical therapy, let's do it. Not that I thought my angel baby needed those services, but because they were free. When he was 3, Michael and I were summoned to a special meeting at the snazzy curriculum-based preschool that taught swimming and had their lunches catered by Whole Foods. In hushed tones, his teacher suggested that Sebastian be held back a year. She couched her request in such a way that I imagine she thought I was going to pick up a stapler and throw it at her face. She claimed he wouldn't do his own work, that he would wait until the person sitting next to him, usually a girl, sensed his lack of commitment and did it for him. Michael and I agreed to holding him back a year semi-reluctantly because what the teacher saw as problematic, we saw as downright ingenious. Driving to and from the preschool, I used that time to bond with my son and support what they were doing in the classroom. I remember pulling up in a lane next to a fire truck and knowing that he was learning his colors that week, asked him, "Hey, bud, what color is a fire truck?" Sebastian has always loved emergency vehicles, and even to this day, his world stops when they pass by. With no pause whatsoever, Bash proclaimed, "Green!" Striving to never use the word no, I gently corrected, "A leaf is green. What color is a fire truck?" Without going upstairs to his brain, walking around and finding the correct answer, Bash once again blurted out, "It's green!" Well, at least he was in the ballpark, I thought. I allowed myself to take comfort that he didn't answer baby duck or 52. One day at pickup, Sebastian's preschool teacher said my fairy child looked her dead in the eye and said, "You're a bitch." I was mortified, thinking this bad behavior was a direct reflection on my parenting. But as I thought about it, it didn't make sense. Where could he have heard that specific phrase? It's not like I had him on my lap while binge watching The Real Housewives of Dubuque. I cast an accusatory eye at my husband, who has been known to drop the occasional B-bomb, as well as F-bomb, S-bomb, and yes, C-bomb when warranted. Michael sheepishly looked at me and defended, "Okay, sure, maybe I have cursed in his presence, but not 'you're a bitch.' You'd have a better argument if he said, 'Bitch, please.'" Shortly after that, "you're a bitch" came into our house with alarming frequency. We tried ignoring it. We tried scolding. We tried swatting him on the behind. But if anything, "you're a bitch" was becoming something of a family motto. About 4 months after the "you're a bitch" infestation, there was a get-together at the school. I brought a potluck, something that contained no dairy, no nuts, no strawberries, no meat, no honey, no flavor. And at this event, I saw Sebastian's teacher scold another child in heated tones from across the playground. "That's it," she admonished. "You're benched." A wave of realization came down on me. My son wasn't calling me a bitch. He was giving me a timeout. In kindergarten, my son, Sebastian Bash, was pulled from class once a week for speech therapy. Not that he had an impediment, but sometimes what was happening up here was not coming out down here. I wasn't totally convinced it was necessary, but once again, it was free. And he was held back in preschool. And for a time, he did insist fire trucks were green, and he did have issues with the bench-bitch differentiation. It was in elementary school, Michael and I were introduced to the IEP, Individualized Educational Plan. Most students with any kind of needs, physical needs, special needs, have one or should have one. Bash was tagged as being one of those kids. An IEP is basically a meeting with the school psychologist, school nurse, homeroom teacher, someone from the district, the parents, and the assistant principal, who in our case maintained a contrived dispassion that I found unnerving. The idea is that everyone in the room has equal say as to what services Sebastian will need on top of his regular schooling. Going into the end of the year IEP, I remember feeling confident. Sebastian's kindergarten teacher always spoke fondly about him, and from what I could tell, speech therapy was going really well. I was entirely unprepared, however, when we were told that Sebastian would not be allowed to continue at the school. They claimed they didn't have the services he needed and recommended a school with a special day class, basically meaning his reading, writing, and arithmetic would be taught by a special ed teacher, but for PE, recess, lunch, and the arts, Sebastian would be mixed in with the general population. It felt like the rug had been pulled out from under us. Michael and I had moved to our neighborhood in part because of the boutique school a mere 3-minute walk away. I tried to reason with the stony assistant principal. I begged, cajoled, I yelled, but she was as taciturn as a constipated guard dog. That's right, she refused to budge. And in the end, the IEP, she handed us papers to look over and eventually sign, attached to a list of 3 schools she wanted us to check out. As we exited the bungalow where the meeting took place, Sebastian's kindergarten teacher covertly sidled up to us, eyes darting about. She whispered so low her voice was almost inaudible. "Get a lawyer." Before we could ask any questions, she quickly scuttled away. The idea of being litigious seemed extreme. I couldn't imagine the school, and by extension the district, didn't have our son's best interests at heart. So Michael and I, one by one, visited the schools near our house with a special day class. One of the schools had a playground monitor with militia ideation. He wore a drill sergeant's hat and enjoyed the power of his whistle. When recess was over and the bell rang, this yahoo raised his whistle to his lips, gave it 3 sharp trills. Each child obediently went down to their knees, left arm Gestapo-like in the air, right arm bent with pointer fingers at their lips, making the shush gesture. No fucking way your son's going to this school. Each school was worse than the previous. I talked to other parents. What should we do? Again and again, the advice was the same. Get a lawyer, a special ed lawyer. So, flying in the face of my own idealism, that is what we did. I walked into the assistant principal's office with the papers she gave me unsigned. And before she could craft an argument, I assumed my best 1980s nighttime soap character stance. We've retained a lawyer. Without missing a beat, she closed her mouth in disgust, opened her desk drawer, pulled out a card and gave it to me saying, "You need to call the district. Now get the fuck out of my office," was heavily implied. Once we got to the district office, all sorts of doors swung wide. Evidently, "We are going to sue you" is the open sesame to LAUSD. It would be a bit of a drive, but we ended up choosing another village-like school, but this time in West Hollywood. There were 2 things of note of the West Hollywood school. 1, they failed my son's education. That is just a fact. On one of his IEPs, the special ed staff created 15 moderately attainable goals for Sebastian to complete by the end of the school year. 8 months later, my son had completed 3. So, of course, I called our lawyer, who told me we would have better leverage if we stuck it out 1 more year and to keep track of any slip-up, any grievance that occurred. The second thing of note was their auditorium. When Bash first got to the school, the word auditorium was clearly marked on the side of the building in raised letters. Above that was some descriptor, wasn't sure what, the something auditorium. But the something was oddly covered up with a box. Priding myself an amateur sleuth, I asked around and found out the something was no other than Michael Jackson. It turned out the king of pop himself went to that West Hollywood school for 1 year and then later in life gave an endowment to build the auditorium. For propriety's sake, the school boxed up his name when Mr. Jackson was having all of those legal issues. A year and a half later, about the time I was figuring out which Institute of Learning Sebastian would be going to next, Michael Jackson fatally overdosed on a propofol and sedative cocktail. Then a peculiar thing happened. Propriety went out the window, and the West Hollywood school immersed itself in a grotesque Michael Jackson thriller, Shyamalan Neverland Renaissance. Students' artwork of his face festooned the hallways. The 4th grade orchestra featured his music, and yes, the school removed the box, proudly declaring it again the Michael Jackson Auditorium. At that point, I had quite the list for the district. Not only did Sebastian complete only 3 of his 15 goals on his IEP, not only did they neglect to give my son a psychological evaluation within the 2 months time frame after asking for it, but the school, in a burst of blatant hypocrisy, glorified pedophiliac Michael Jackson, but not until he had moonwalked into oblivion. Our appeal to change schools was granted. By 4th grade, I did have to admit that my son, Sebastian Bash, did have very apparent special needs. He was on ADHD medication, saw a therapist twice a week, and the designation on his IEP was specific learning disability, which umbrellas so many developmental issues that it's really quite unspecific. In middle school, Sebastian came up with a new phrase, "Baby, go bye-bye," which always sent him into fits of laughter. Some of his friends shared in the silliness and played along, while others began to distance themselves and tease him. The more he was made fun of for this inane utterance, the more he would say it. For my son, negative attention became intoxicating. Then very like "you're a bitch" those many years before, "baby go bye-bye" was reiterated with disturbing regularity. In his early and his middle teens, Sebastian's actions and vocabulary at home became more juvenile, if you can believe it. He'd perseverate with gruesome repetitions, sing-songy refrains, and insipid baby talk. But then actually it was more than that. He called people names. He refused to take responsibility. He argued at the drop of the hat, even when there wasn't anything to argue about. He proclaimed expertise on issues, oftentimes in the form of a jumbled word salad that could easily be disproven. He changed his mind at whim, altered the narrative when it suited, went on the tap with rhetoric that was divisive and even racist. During these years, his impulsivity was off the charts, redirecting him again and 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 again became a way of life. "Baby go bye-bye" would be phased out, and a new phrase would replace it. One of them being, "Papa, you're so special," spoken in a smarmy, condescending way that made me want to fire back, "No, you're special," which of course he is, and of course I could never say. His high school years were a collection of stops and starts. Kicked out of this school because of behavioral issues, not asked back to that school because he couldn't maintain the curriculum. I removed him from yet another because of an incident with a 15-year-old student named Cassidy, with a K. "Papa, I don't want to leave. It's a really good school." "Sebastian, you were left unchaperoned and then fondled by that girl." "Yeah, that's why it's a really good school." During these last 4 years, it became crystal clear that my priority was to get Bash through high school, whatever it took. It also became crystal clear that once he got that diploma, he would have to leave our house. Yes, I would be able to reclaim some space. And yes, his nattering was becoming more negative, more caustic, more pervasive. And yes, Michael and I had a very real concern that the focus Sebastian demanded took from our second child. But most importantly, when my son is out of the house, his childish behavior is less evident. And I feared if he were to remain at home, he would only marinate in his immaturity. For his own benefit, he needed his own tribe. I had no idea who that would be or what that would look like, but I had to believe that they do exist somewhere. Last spring, despite being held back once in preschool and twice in elementary, my son, Sebastian Bash, at 19 years old, graduated from high school. In the depths of my soul, I am profoundly proud of that fact. My husband and I are still not quite sure how this next part happened, but Bash somehow got a job with the California Conservation Corps. He gets paid $18 an hour to clear brush, pick up trash, and dig ditches. It's nothing glamorous, but it provides a schedule, 3 square meals a day, and most importantly, room and board. He lives in Camarillo for most of the week.
Wow.
Sebastian has since learned how to order an Uber, master the Metro link to and from Camarillo, wash his own laundry, things that probably wouldn't have happened if he was still at home full time. His contract is for a year, and I don't know what happens after that, but undeniably, I do see growth. "So, do you have a key for this padlock or what?" the plumber asked impatiently. Never has anyone been so intent in getting into my crawl space. I am not going to lie. I have not experienced empty nest syndrome. In fact, I have quite enjoyed the quiet with Bash gone. But as that plumber glared at me, I really wish my son, Sebastian Bash, was there. He would have poked fun at my forgetfulness and would have loved asking the plumber 101 questions about the earthquake valve, and just possibly, he might have known where to find that goddamn padlock key.
I've known him. He was my first friend on Ambrose Avenue. He was almost 2.
Mhm.
I had just moved in, and someone rang my bell, and I opened the door and I saw no one. And I looked down and there was a tiny person.
Oh.
And I opened it and he was alone. He just wandered out. And I opened the door and he just walked right in, and I have my dogs are huskies, and you guys have huskies. And he just walked in and hugged the dogs and helped himself to food in my kitchen. It was dog food, but but he has been in my house and in my life every day since, and I am forever thankful to him and to both of you. So, with that, thank you all for coming out. February 5th is our next true story, and the theme is safe and sound. And we have a wonderful lineup. So I will announce that in the next couple days. And again, thank you. We have wine and cheese. Hang out. That's it. Put some music back on.
Now I can eat a Tristan.